Okay, so this actually has been a project in the making for quite a while now. It's something that I've been wanting to work on for a little bit, but I've run into some issues in the past, mainly because finding a fitting, things like that, right? It's a little bit difficult. So if you don't know, this is an M10 by 1.0, and this port specifically on the head, this is my spare head. This port specifically is for the oil pressure sensor. A lot of people may know this one because it does go bad rather quickly and causes issues. Well, I take that back. It doesn't go bad rather quickly. There are people that in the past that have reported that they've had issues with the sensor. It's a fairly common one. It's also a very easy fix even when the motor's inside the bike. But that being said, the goal that we're looking at today is oil pressure, specifically oil pressure gauge, right? So if you don't know, the oil channel, right, comes through here, right here, goes through the head, up through this channel, which is where the pressure sensor is located in line with, and then the bottom of the cam cradle goes into here, and then it goes along and goes to the jets. So that's why I say, but in the past, or I've said it in the past, anytime you pull the cam bridge off, you don't necessarily I don't recommend taking the jets off because you wouldn't want to break these, but tiny little hole, you can get something in there to help clean those out, just to make sure you maximize the amount of oil flow that goes through there. And that's obviously what lubricates your cam lobes, which people have had in the past as well. From the factory, they come with drawings already, right? So that's kind of the way that the oil works for at least the head. Now, keep in mind, oil system in the head probably receives the least amount of pressure out of everything. And that's because of the fact that it is the last part of the oil system. From there, it gets sprayed out inside of the head itself, and then it drops down into this valley, and then it eventually makes its way down into the engine itself. What I actually like to do is, hold on. Right down there. That's casting, right? Right here. So, my own head, I like to clean that up because I don't want any oil being impeded from going back in. So, I tend to go in here, clean the casting up, make it easier for oil to return, right? While we're here, we'll take this moment to do a quick look around with the head. Obviously, these are where the shafts are, where the cam lobes right on top of. They have the little flaps that are on there. Valve guides. Normally, on top of the valve guides, you'll have the valve oil stem seals, and then these are the perches or the mounting flanges for the mounting bolts. This one typically has a guide. That one usually has a guide. All right. Okay. Sorry about that. Had to go take care of something. That being said, back to this. Obviously, M10 by 1.0. The trick is that there's a seal, an O-ring, that actually seals this part all the way around. Then you have this flat flange here. This one didn't work very well. One, because it doesn't have much of a flange to seat against this flange, and the O-ring itself. The other one is that when I was tightening it, you have to have this kind of clocked in the right position, and it actually ended up breaking, which I'm good with because I'd much rather have this break than to rip the threads out of here. So this fitting, no good. Couldn't use that. The other part too is that it was too close to the side of the head, so when you went to go install the gauge, it created a bit of a problem. And that was mainly because of spacing and everything else in order to get the gauge to fit. So there's a bit of an order of operations in order to make this happen. The other kind of pseudo compromise that I had to make is that because I had to use a different spacer, the spacer is much bigger, And with that, it brings it really close and tight to the frame, which really only matters during the installation process, because during the install process, it is a absolute pain in the butt to get it in there. So yes, you could do this to your own. Is it going to be a pain? Absolutely. Just keep that in mind. And the compromise is that I actually end up having to use a super low profile nut in order to actually get it installed. And we'll look at that here in a second. But that was a pain. If you were wondering what this is from, this this is actually from a inner tube from a bike. So down here at the base, right? Granted, this is for a tubeless setup, so it's different, but same principle. I ran a bolt through it, and then it was good to go. But let's go take a look at this, and I'll show you what we're talking about. All right, and this is the gauge, kind of tucked in there. And believe it or not, while on the bike, if I lean over, I can actually see the gauge and get a reading off of it. So that part's pretty cool. Here is the original wire. Right here is basically a like a ring connector that just goes into the end. You just undo a nut, and that pops right off. Sensor itself, it's going to be really hard to see. Okay, right there. So the sensor ends here. The adapter, sorry for the light. The adapter is back there. Let me see if I can get this to. Might be too many reflective surfaces. Okay, there we go. So if you look, you'll see the adapter here. I'll put a link in the bottom of which one I used. Long story short, far end of the block, or on the block side for the head, that's an M10 male. The end where the sensor goes into is an M10 female. And then you have two ports. Those are 1/8 NTP, which is a standard threading specifically for gauges and whatnot. So you'll see that I have a plug on the end there. On the right hand side here, I actually have an extension. It's a very small extension. And then I have the gauge itself. So yes, that is spelled incorrecly. Don't ask me why. So in order to do this, what you'll have to do is essentially, I took the O-ring from the sensor, installed it on the block side of the fitting. The main adapter piece that's back here is, let's see here. Oh, there we go. That's much better. The main adapter piece that's back there comes with basically a copper crush seal. I put the washer, then the copper crush, or the aluminum crush seal, and then the adapter itself. Then tighten that down. Once that's been tightened down, let's see, come on, focus. There we go. Once it's tightened down, it should be good. But I didn't tighten it all the way at first. The plug went in first, so installed the plug off, and then before I tightened everything down, afterwards I rotated this to where it was facing straight up. That gave me the clearance I needed to install the gauge. So then I installed the gauge and then did the final tighten down on this to move it into position, and then tightened this gauge down enough to where it angled to the angle that I needed it to. Now from there, I used a copper crush fitting, crush seal between the adapter piece and the actual oil pressure fitting. That allowed me to install it. Now the tricky part was I actually ended up undoing a lot of stuff here. This bracket, the motor mounts all the way around, and then I essentially had to get a pry bar to help pry this piece out of the way enough just to be able to install the sensor onto the end of this adapter. And the reason for that's because there's a lot more space back here, a lot less space back here than I was hoping, and that meant that it pushed the sensor out further this way. So the tip of it does not touch, but it is very close to the edge here. But as you can see, I was able to get the rubber boot back on, so that's good to go. So that part is a freaking pain to get this adapter sensor attached to the adapter. My goal, I think, in the future is going to be to see if they can find a smaller adapter, and then hopefully that fixes the problem. But until then, this is kind of what I'll be running for now. So here's what I've observed. On cold start, it will hit about 30 to 35 psi oil pressure, and then after a long amount of riding, that actually drops down to a very surprisingly low amount, like 10 sometimes drops below that. Now keep in mind, this is oil pressure from the head. The oil pressure spec from the manual actually says it's below 5,000 RPM when warmed up at a certain temperature. I believe it's like 70 degrees Celsius or something like that. So basically when the engine's hot, normal idle oil pressure is like 10 psi, I believe. Now that normal oil pressure reading is actually done from the oil pressure filter housing. There's an adapter you can get. It's KTM Power Parts tool that you basically has the same piece, but it's threaded, and then from there they have a gauge that's attached to that at the end of it. So the pressure from that filter location is likely much higher than the pressure that's being right here, but it gives you kind of an idea. I mean, I can't imagine it's too much less, but it is at the highest top of the oiling system, so take that with a grain of salt. So yes, you can see it while riding. You know, you can. I want to say it's while riding around 35, 30, somewhere on there. So kind of what I was reading while cold. But we'll go ahead and start real quick, and we'll take a look real fast, all right? So let's see. Yeah, so there you have it. I'll keep an eye on it, and like I said, I'll see if they can find another adapter. But until then, that's kind of where we're at for now. I don't want to make this too much longer, so we'll just end it here. If you get any questions, let me know. All right.